All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Takeoff podcast with John Clark, presented by Live Casino Hotel Philadelphia. Phillies coming off the World Series appearance, and there's lots of rumblings out there at the GM meetings in Vegas, right? You're in Vegas. Jon Morosi joining us right now. John, of course, you're with MLB Network, Peacock, NBC Sports. You're part of the family. Philadelphia is loving what you're hearing out there about Trea Turner.
John, it's my pleasure to be speaking about Phillies baseball with you, and just what an exciting year it's been. First of all, I just want to compliment the Phillies fans on the extraordinary support that we saw all around the country during the course of the postseason. My goodness, just you could tell that electricity through the television set all month long. So it just one of my favorite ballparks and favorite cities. So I was just thrilled for everybody there. But yeah, to your point, it's not done yet. There's a lot of excitement still to come, and I really think that the Phillies and Trea Turner are an ideal fit for a lot of different reasons. Let's start with the versatility of Bryce and Stott. As a young player, we've seen just what a professional young player he is, and that he would be someone who would, I think, just based on his character, be comfortable moving to second base if that were to be the best way for the Phillies to get better and to bring Trea Turner in. That's number one. Number two is we know the relationship that Trea has with Bryce Harper. They've been friends going back to their time with the Nationals. I think that would be a key aspect of all this, that Bryce Harper could really advocate strongly in both ways, to tell Trea, hey, this is the place that you want to play, and to tell ownership, this is the kind of player that we need. It's a really nice fit from that respect. And I think also from Trea's perspective, of course, he's a Florida native. He'd be able to have spring training close to home in Clearwater, and then play in the National League East, where he knows he has a high degree of comfort already. So for a lot of reasons, John, this is a deal that makes a ton of sense. Dave Dombrowski has acknowledged an interest in at least generally speaking, looking at that shortstop market. And from that standpoint, I don't think there's a better fit right now than Trea Turner to the Phillies.
And you are right there in the lobby out there where it all goes down. Are you hearing from other people, industry people, that the Phillies and Trea Turner are the most likely match?
It's certainly been one of the more likely scenarios that's been linked together. Now, certainly we're still in the early days as we speak here, shortly before the actual opening of free agency. You're not fully able to speak contract terms with an outside player until a couple hours from when we're speaking at this moment. So by definition, there's nothing close or imminent that we can speak of. However, I think a lot of people around the industry see this as a very natural pairing. If Trea Turner were to sign with the Phillies, it would be met with a lot of nods of approval that say, yes, this makes a lot of sense. You look around, and I'm not sure that Carlos Correa fits this team quite as well as Turner does. I'm not sure that Bogaerts fits this team quite as well as Turner does. And Dansby Swanson, I think a lot of us believe he'll eventually go back to the Atlanta Braves, where they don't want to have a repeat of what happened with Freddie Freeman last year, where he ended up leaving, and it was a very discordant moment for the game and for the Atlanta Braves. So for all those reasons, I do think Turner to the Phillies makes the most sense. Now, I'll caution by saying I think the Giants are interested. I think the Mariners are interested in Trea as well. It's going to be a very competitive bidding process to get him. But I think that the Phillies are the team that truly, as we speak today, even more so than the Dodgers, makes the most sense for Trea Turner.
And Trea Turner was college roommates with Carlos Rodon. He tried to recruit him. I'm not trying to put it all out there, but do you think the Phillies also have interest in Carlos?
It's a great point, John. I do think the Phillies adding some starting pitching is a possibility. But I think that to add both of them would be a significant lift financially. Now, we've seen the Phillies invest a lot in free agency and feel comfortable doing so, whether it's Harper, Castellanos, Wheeler, Schwarber. But I think there is a limit if you add Turner to that conversation. I would honestly look at potentially adding in one more layer to the bullpen because we saw how much success the Phillies had. But we know, of course, Robertson is not there for the long term necessarily. Eflin declined his option. He's a free agent now. So as well as Alvarado and Dominguez pitched, I would look to add one more late inning reliever to just shore up that part of your club before necessarily spending a bunch on Rodon. And make no mistake, it's going to be a very, very expensive player, just given the amount of teams that really need a starting pitcher. And I think with the Phillies right now, they've got to feel really good about their top three, not just their top two. But with Wheeler, Nola, and Suarez, I think that the way that he pitched, the way Ranger really emerged, they've got to feel great about their top three. And so they can be a little more choosy about who they add to the rotation after that.
Yeah, you make a good point. And Dave Dombrowski has openly talked about maybe bringing up one of their young guys, maybe for that fourth spot, like Andrew Painter. So maybe you're thinking that they would like maybe a bullpen piece or two, especially how prevalent the bullpens are in the playoffs, huh?
I think they really would be, John. I think that to me is a more natural place to focus. Or I'll say this, a pitcher who is an adaptable arm. I'll mention Ross Stripling's name. I think Ross Stripling is one of the most valuable free agents out there that people aren't talking about. He saved the Blue Jays staff in 2022, just as he had done for the Dodgers in years previous to that. Being available, being adaptable, starter reliever is an extraordinarily valuable skill, and Ross Stripling has it. And I would expect the Phillies to be among the many teams who look at Stripling and like what he brings from the standpoint of his adaptability.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong about the finances. I believe the Phillies payroll was around $243 million last year, and it possibly could grow this year. Do you think when John Middleton sees how far this team went, Dave Dombrowski's all in? You're not bringing Dave Dombrowski in unless you're all in. Do you think they possibly could get up into that stratosphere of the Dodgers and Mets the way they spend?
I think it's possible. And certainly based on the track record of John Middleton being willing to spend and his commitment to the fans and to the organization, it would not surprise me. We've seen the Phillies in the past go up to that level back in their previous World Series years. As you know, they were a team that went out there and went the extra mile to bring back Cliff Lee. It feels like it's a lifetime ago to say that, but that was a big move at the time to construct that rotation with Roy Halladay as well. So we have seen with some of the same decision makers at the ownership level want to really be the driving force to be one of the biggest spenders in the game. So, John, from where I sit, the luxury tax threshold, from my observations of John Middleton in the past and Dave Dombrowski as well, I don't think that's a hard cap at all. And for the right player in the right situation, and I think Trea Turner might be that right player in right situation, I think we could see the Phillies move past that.
And I've seen John Middleton sign some baseballs for some Phillies fans by saying Bryce Harper is not stupid money. So he means business. How about when you look at the lineup, if you're able to get a Trea Turner at the top of the lineup, one of the fastest players in baseball, he's got it all for a leadoff guy. How does that put everything else right in the lineup with Schwarber, Castellanos, and all those guys?
That's a great question. I think, John, it would present Rob Thompson with a number of different options. You could potentially keep Schwarber leading off if you wanted to, and then have Turner bat second. Of course, he batted second a lot after Mookie in LA. That's always been an option for Trea. He's also had a lot of experience leading off. So I see Trea as being probably a 1 or a 2 hitter in this lineup, just based on the 3, 4, 5 you could have. You bump Rhys down a spot. Obviously, you have Bryce, you have Castellanos. There's a lot of significant bats there, and there's enough of a potent middle part of the lineup, John, that I would say that I'd want Turner to bat 1 or 2, and then you just sort of think about the one argument to have Trea batting ahead of Schwarber, even though Schwarber is more athletic than people think, is you would have a better chance of Trea scoring from first on a double by Schwarber than the other way around, and also if you have Trea leading off, it probably helps Schwarber see more fastballs, which is what you want. So I do think for that reason, having Turner 1, Schwarber 2 is probably the way you would do it. But there's also a certain logic to having Trea bat second because of just how adaptable and powerful he is. He's a run producer and a run scorer and a run stopper. He does it all. And I think that Trea with the Phillies, you've kind of got my mind going and my gears turning here, John, about just how great of a fit he'd be for the Phillies.
Well, yeah, and you've got everybody in Philadelphia fired up with your reporting and what you're hearing there in the lobby. Rhys Hoskins, he's an interesting guy because, I've seen the statistics since he's come into baseball, home runs and RBIs. I think he's like top 15 or something like that in baseball with those numbers. A lot of Phillies fans have been upset with his defense. Some of them are saying maybe you trade Rhys Hoskins. What do you think is on the radar for Rhys's future in Philly?
John, it's a fair question. I'd be surprised if he was traded. I really would be. I think he's too much of a core player. And for me, you look at the big picture here, when you bring in a lot of players from elsewhere, whether it's Bryce or Schwarber or Castellanos or Trea, if they go that route, even Zach Wheeler. It's important to have that homegrown position player to be the true north of your team. And the way that Hoskins carries himself, the way he's grown up in the organization, I get it. He's not a perfect player. He can be streaky. He can strike out. I get it. But you look at what the Cubs lost when they let Anthony Rizzo go and traded him, of course. I think Rhys brings a lot of the same qualities that Anthony brings as a person. And so I'd be really reluctant to move on from him. He's not a perfect player. I get that. He'd probably be the first to admit that too. But he's a really important player and a great citizen for that clubhouse.
Yeah, and we talked about Bryce Harper, the recruiter. He kind of pushed John Middleton and Dave Dombrowski last year with Schwarber and Castellanos. I'm sure he's doing the same with Trea Turner. What do you think will be the outcome with his elbow? If he's going to have surgery, would it be kind of what Rhys had, or are we possibly looking at Tommy John?
It's a great question, John. I think the Phillies will know more on Monday. He's going to see Dr. Neil Elitrash on Monday, who's an expert in that area. Dr. Neil Elitrash is basically the foremost leading authority on elbows, whether you're a position player, pitcher in baseball today. So they'll get a lot of great information there. It's hard to prejudge what the possible outcomes are, except for to say this, that if you're a Phillies fan and if you hear the words Tommy John surgery, to not be terribly alarmed. First of all, we saw what he did in October on a bad elbow, A, and B, Tommy John surgery, if it's needed, and it's a big if, we don't know, but if it's needed for a position player, it's not the same distance of recovery time that you would see for a starting pitcher or even a reliever. It's a much shorter time horizon. So I would still say that even if Bryce needs Tommy John, that you would still look to have him back and being himself sometime in the early months of 2023. I'm not going to be able to say, hey, opening day for sure, mark him down. But I think you'll be able to have them available to you early on in the 2023 season.
And you've seen Ohtani. I mean, the way he's come back and be able to hit. Yeah. Hey, I know we caught up with each other in the press box when you came in for a visit with the Phillies, and Peacock did a great job with that. And I know you talked to some of the players at that moment. If somebody were to say the Phillies are going to go to Game 6 of the World Series, what would you have said?
I would have been surprised, John. And I saw the Phils, I think, twice this past season. I saw once meeting with Joe Girardi in the manager's office and once meeting with Rob Thompson. So I saw him in two different moments. I think I saw him against the Mets and the Braves. So it would have been a huge surprise, obviously, especially during the strugglings that they had early on in the season. But for me, it was a great demonstration of Rob Thompson's leadership. I'm happy for him. He is a first-class person, as you know, someone who's really done the right things in the game for a long time and finally got his chance. So I said for a long time, I'm familiar with his hometown in Ontario, being from Michigan. And so I said for a while, Justin Bieber was knocked out of the top spot as the number one person from Stratford. It went Rob Thompson, Peter Mansbridge, who was the eminent voice of the CBC News for a long time and is a great man. So I would say power rankings still now, I go Rob Thompson 1, Peter Mansbridge only because he's retired, because Peter's the voice, the best. And then probably the Biebs is 3rd. So that tells you how I feel about how strong I feel about Rob Thompson's work and Mr. Mansbridge too. And hey, I got respect for the Biebs as well. But right now you got to go Rob Thompson in the top spot. And I think the way that Rob just brought that group together was extraordinary work for him. And it really bodes well for the Phillies' future as well.
Yeah, that's great, by the way. I mean, knocking hockey players off the list there in Canada, that's amazing. And he was the first, manager from Canada to go to a World Series. That's pretty special.
Really, really is. And so I think you'll probably see maybe that sign outside of Stratford, Ontario, saying home of not just the Biebs, but Rob Thompson, first ever Canadian-born manager in the World Series.
You got a chance to talk to Nick Castellanos and some of the Phillies. I know Nick maybe had a little adjustment period with Philadelphia. This experience with all of these free agents who kind of came together with the Phillies, and then how much they bonded in the playoffs. It's amazing to me looking at that clubhouse, just how much they bonded and came closer together during the playoff run. How much do you think that experience they had in the biggest moments of the World Series will carry into next year, now having that under their belt as a team?
Nick's an emotional guy. I've known him since he was a rookie in Detroit, so I go pretty far back with him. He's someone that has always been at his best, been at his most intense when the stakes around him are the highest and when there is a lot of buy-in from his teammates. When he's been on bad teams or teams that are struggling, you can sort of tell that he's not having the most fun. And you get that. I always admire that in a competitor to not, he's going to tell you how he's feeling. If he's upset about the current state of the team, he'll tell you. I've always liked that about him. He's honest. And so for me, I could tell just in his body language as the year went along how engaged he was. And he even shared with Ken Rosenthal later on in the playoffs about how focused he felt and how his focus maybe drifted at times in the regular season on the defensive side of the ball. But we saw he made a game-saving catch. I talked about this a lot during the World Series. If he doesn't make that catch in Game 1, the Astros probably celebrate in Game 5 at the bank. That's how dominant the Astros were after that. So I really think that Nick and his commitment level is only going to get higher. And when he's surrounded by great players, the same way that he was when he first arrived at the Tigers, that was Cabrera and Verlander and JD Martinez, Scherzer, that generation, a lot of really alpha competitors. And I think that's going to bring out the best in Nick. And there's nothing that, to me, sets the stage for winning like that shared playoff experience and showing the likes of Bohm, showing the likes of Stott as a young player, what it means to be around winning.
Yeah, and I tell you, Kyle Schwarber is one of the best leaders I have personally seen with the way he's rubbed off on his teammates. When you look at this offseason, we're hearing word Jacob deGrom may want to go to Texas and things like that. Do you think the Phillies can win out in this offseason over the Mets?
They could. And the Mets, it's a really interesting point, John, because if the Mets lose deGrom, do they pivot and suddenly get heavily involved in the Judge market? There's been mixed reviews here about the chances of Judge going across town in New York. I still wouldn't think it's terribly likely, but if they lose deGrom and Nimmo, who I think is an underrated, really good player, where does that leave them? Nimmo's an outfielder. They would still have some room out there, depending on how they want to use McNeil and allocate some different players in the outfield spots. So, John, to me, is as much of a remote possibility as it might seem for Judge to cross town, we know Steve Cohen is not afraid to spend, much like John Middleton. So that this is good for baseball. This is good for those great passionate fans in the Northeast Corridor. I love it. I love the Mets-Phillies rivalry. I love how amped the fans get on either side of it and how much back and forth there is and how many different places of business between Philly and New York have Phillies fans and Mets fans side by side and how that passion comes out. I love that. And so for me, I'm going to be really excited to see how this all unfolds. And if the Mets lose out, again, on a couple different players, if they leave, you're right. Phillies fans will probably rejoice. But if number 99 comes into Flushing, that could be a problem.
Final question for you. When you saw Citizens Bank Park rocking like it was during the postseason, everybody from around the country's watching that. And was that almost a showcase to a guy like Trea Turner, some other guys like, wow, this is what it can be like, one of the best atmospheres in all of baseball?
Oh, it has to be. It has to be. Winning is the best marketing that exists in professional sports. And we've shared this before. I'm from Michigan, and there was a period of time where, whether it was Torrey Hunter or Joe Nathan, there were some veteran free agents, Victor Martinez, who decided to sign in Detroit. It may not have been their first choice based on our great weather, but it was the winning that brought them in and the atmosphere and the quality of the team. Philly is the same thing. And as you know very well, 10 years ago, Philly was the place that people wanted to sign. That's why Roy Halladay went there. It's why Roy Oswalt went there. It's why Cliff Lee went there. This was the place that people wanted to be. Papelbon, same thing. So I look at Philadelphia as it's one of the great organizations in professional sports. And I really think, too, John, I reflected a lot on David Montgomery and his legacy and how proud certainly he would have been to see that ballpark full again. And a lot of the tone that he set by the way that he treated people throughout his career and the organizational ethics surrounding the Phillies and just that customer service, making sure that every fan was cared for, every member of the organization was cared for. I know how proud Bonnie Clark is of that legacy. And you could talk to Bonnie about that. And I just think that there was a lot of David Montgomery in the way that playoff unfolded. And certainly he's looking down proud about how it looked, I'm sure. But I really think that way of treating people that David always championed, being such a great citizen of Philadelphia for so long, I think a lot of that was there in the air. I think in October at Citizens Bank Park, and I'm sure a lot of those threads of the way that David always treated people are still very much alive as part of his legacy.
That is very well said. I'll always remember, Dave, that he would remember our photographers' names, every single person that came to cover the team or worked around the team. He knew everybody's name. And I think I agree with you, man. Baseball is back in Philly. I had some friends tell me they brought their sons or little kids for the first time, and now the kids want to play baseball. So it's almost like an awakening for Philadelphia with baseball again.
I love hearing that. It's a great city. It's one that's always been so welcoming to me when I've been there, and it's one that I always look forward to. When I see Philly on my schedule, John, I'm always excited. It's a great baseball town, great sports town with just incredibly passionate, welcoming people. So I already can't wait to be back there in 2023.
It's going to be the place to be, hopefully. Great job on MLB Network, NBC Sports, Peacock, multimedia. Jon Morosi, we really appreciate it. And Philly is following your every word with this Trea Turner situation.
John, thank you so much. But we'll hope to catch up around the winter meetings as well. All the best to you and your family.
You got it, John. Take care. Thank you.